Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. We have been studying Siddhantabindu and especially the concept of Adhyasa. In the previous class, Madhusudana Saraswati had quoted from Vartika, Vittat Putraha Priyaha, Putrat Pindaha, Pindat Tatha Indriyam, Indriyebhyaha Priyaha Pranaha, Pranad Atma Priyaha Paraha, Ityadi. That means, naturally, this Adhyasa, this is because of ignorance. That's what Advaita philosophy says. That means, if we are unable to realize our own nature, that causes all problems. Avidya kshetram uttaresham prasupta tanuvichinna udaranam. That's what Yoga Shastra also says. That means our spiritual ignorance is the grooming field where all the other emotions, feelings, all these crop up. That means it is the kshetra, and just because of this particular ignorance within, all the other emotions rake up. So here our intensity of this ignorance, that leads to the intensity of attachment. That's why we find that a person is attached to his property, but he will be more attached to his own persons. But when compared, he will be more attached to his own body, and when it comes to his own body, he will prefer one particular sense organ, and if it comes to his own life, then he will prefer the self, and self is the dearest one to all. So that's what we had seen earlier, and we find here Tena Anyonya Adhyasat Chidachit Grandhi Rupaha Adhyasaha. So Madhusudana Saraswati explains in his own words that this Adhyasa is Chidachit Grandhi Rupaha Anyonya Aropa Rupaha Anyonya Adhyasa. What is this? It is just because we are unable to see the reality, we attribute whatever has already been fed. So that particular one is projected, and this Adhyasa is like a Granthi. Granthi means the knot or connecting point, juncture, and this particular Adhyasa is the juncture between Chit and Achit. That's why Madhusudana Saraswati has very beautifully explained that it is Chidachit Grandhi Rupaha. And here this Adhyasa connects Chit and Achit, matter and consciousness. So one is the inert matter and the other is consciousness. And what connects these two? It is only Adhyasa, which is caused by avidya or ignorance. So this is a beautiful definition. This is Anyonya Adhyasat. That means projecting something on some other thing. And here, especially in the spiritual context, we find that the matter or the inert, insentient, that is attributed or projected on the consciousness. And on the contrary, we find that the consciousness is also superimposed on matter. This way, Anyonya Adhyasa is taking place. Ekatarasya Adhyasa Angikare Anyatarasya Abhana Prasangat. Nay, why do you unnecessarily accept Adhyasa as twofold? Instead, you can say that only one-sided Adhyasa is there, which is in the form of projection of something on the other, just like the projection of snake on the rope. So this is only one side. We don't project the snake, the rope on the snake. That means vice versa we don't do. That's why Ekatarasya. So why don't you accept projection of only one thing? That is the problem there. Now the text says Ekatarasya Adhyasa Angikare. That means if we accept projection of only one, then Anyatarasya Abhana Prasanga, then how can the other one become known? That means only one thing is projected, then the other one can never be known. But we find in reality that it is two-sided. adhyastaseva brahme, and if we say that adhyasta, that means whatever is projected is only brahma, that is an illusion, then bhana niyamat, brahme bhana niyamat. So that should shine forth, or that should be present in the illusion. Ime ranga rajate iti samuhalambana vat avashyam itaretaraadhyasaha. Now Madhusudana Saraswati opines that ime ranga rajate, this is a particular example. Ime ranga rajate, that means it is a samuhalambana jnana. That means it is a typical cognition where two things are object simultaneously. That means it is cognition of two things simultaneously. So in short, we can say simultaneous cognition of two things. So at that particular instance, ime ranga rajate, that means these are ranga and rajata. Ranga is conch shell and rajata means silver. So two things are there before, and we are getting simultaneous cognition of both the things. Then both will be the object of same knowledge. Here, avashyam itaretaraadhyasaha. So one single knowledge can have two things as object. Similarly, in adhyasa also there is mutual projection or mutual superimposition. That is very essential. That's what the author feels. Sarva badha avadibhuta chaitanya pariseshe. So here we find sarva badha avadhi. That means sarva badha avadhi is chaitanya only. That means the ultimate point where all contradiction ends is chaitanya, because all the other things can be contradicted, but when it comes to consciousness, that cannot be contradicted, because when somebody contradicts, when somebody negates that there is no consciousness at all, it will be just saying that I am a bachelor, my father is also a bachelor, my grandfather is also a bachelor, so that will be like that. So it is self-contradictory, because the one who is negating that consciousness is himself consciousness. Therefore, one can never negate consciousness. That's why Adi Shankara in his Gita Bhashya also says that nakaschit nahamasmiti pratiyat. That means nobody can negate his own existence. And that's why everybody has to inevitably accept consciousness. And here, sarva badha avadibhuta chaitanya pariseshena. Therefore, when every other thing is denied, that means all the worldly things are denied, everything is negated, but one thing remains, that is consciousness. Because this consciousness is the lone thing after the contradiction of all the other things. And when it remains, parisheshena, na shunyavada apattihi. That's why the Advaitin makes it very clear here that just because we negate all the other things, we don't become shunyavadi, nihilist, like Madhyamika, the shunyavadi Bauddha. We are different from that. The shunyavadi, that means the nihilists, that means who are called as Madhyamika in Buddhist philosophy, they deny everything. And their statement is very particular, sarvam shunyam shunyam. So that particular word sarvam includes everything. And everything in the sense consciousness is also, according to them, is only an empty thing. That means there is nothing. This particular nothingness, this particular voidity, or you can say that nihilism is shunyavada. Now, when the Advaitins propound the theory that everything in the universe is void, null, then naturally people object. And people will naturally allege that the Advaitins are also nihilists. They are Prachanna Bauddha. That is the way Adi Shankaracharya has been attacked several times. That means there has been ideological differences, and people said that Adi Shankaracharya is a Buddhist nihilist, especially in the disguise of an Advaitin. That means you don't find any difference between Shunyavadi and Advaiti. That's what they felt. Because some shlokas of Gaudapada Karika, they appear to be inclining towards the Shunyavada, but if we study the text very carefully, we can find a very conspicuous difference between these two ideologies, that our Advaita is based on Upanishads, and Upanishads are very firm regarding the existence of Brahman. That means they don't say everything Shunya. They say other than Brahma is Shunya. Brahmadiriktam mithya. So that is the basic philosophy of Upanishads taken up by Advaitins and has been strongly propounded. So this particular point, Brahma atiriktam sarvam mithya. So that Shunya, of course, we may look like Buddhist, but one difference is there, that they call everything Shunya and we say that Brahma is real. Satyam jnanam anantam Brahma asti brahmeti chedveda santamenam tato viduhu. So all these Upanishadic statements very vehemently criticize that everything is not Shunya. One Brahman is the lone reality, and everybody should realize that Brahma Sakshatkaraha. So that is the summum bonum of all the Upanishads. And here, because we, the Advaitins, accept the absolute reality as Brahman, we are different from the Shunyavadi Bauddha. This is what Shankaracharya also explained in his commentary on Gaudapada Karika. While explaining the term Vaitatya, he says that some people say that you are not different from Buddhists, but we are different because our philosophy accepts the Brahman as supreme reality, whereas the Madhyamik Shunyavada doesn't have any other reality at all. There is no reality, there is no real thing at all. So that is the difference. And Satyanrita Sambheda Avabhasakatvat Adhyasasya. And here one point is to be noted, that Adhyasasya Satya Anrita Sambheda Avabhasaka. Why there is a necessity of accepting a theory like this, Adhyasa? Now Madhusudana Saraswati once again makes clear that Adhyasa, Satya and Anrita Sambheda Avabhasaka. So 4 words are there. Avabhasaka means that which makes something appear, that which projects something, that is Avabhasaka. And what does this Adhyasa project? Sambheda. Sambheda means Tadatmya, that is identity or non-difference. Between what? Identity between Satya and Anrita. That means real and unreal. So this particular Adhyasa is in a way psychological factor, that it actually mistakes something for other thing, and it creates a kind of temporary identity between the two. So when, out of my ignorance, when I look at a rope and mistake that for a snake, at that particular point my ignorance has caused Adhyasa, which has created an identity between the rope and the snake. So this kind of illusion or this kind of misapprehension is taking place, and that's why Adhyasa one has to accept. Otherwise one cannot explain all the instances of illusion. That is the problem there. And of course we experience in the dream state, we are on the bed, but we get several experiences there. We will be living in a different world, we will be moving with different people, we will be getting different kinds of experiences also, and all these variations cannot be answered unless we resort to the concept of Adhyasa. That's why he says Satya and Anrita. Satya is the real thing, that is the rope, and Anrita means unreal thing, and that is the snake, and both are combined. That means actually that person is not combining that. He has taken only one portion of the object before, and out of his own mind he has projected some other thing, and that has become snake there. But reality is different, and whatever has appeared, that is different, but still at a particular point of time both will become one, and Anrita will be projected, and it is called the result of Adhyasa. Tasmat Purva Adhyasa Mulaha Eva Ayam Uttara Ahankara Adhyasaha. So Purva Adhyasa Mulaha, that means this Adhyasa at this particular point is caused by adhyasa of past, and that adhyasa was caused by its previous adhyasa. This way, every adhyasa will be creating a chain, and that adhyasa will further continue, and that's why it is uttarottara ahankara adhyasa, and there we find a concrete I, ego created, and that is when scanned in deep meditation, we don't find any person called me. Actually, it's very difficult to find myself in meditation, but once I open my eyes, I will become one with the universe through the senses, and I get a kind of wrong identity, and this particular identity causes all problems, and this is the base cause of I, and this is ahankara. This is a false image has been created, and ahankara bijankuravat anadihi. And actually, when did it start? Adhyasa. So we find that there is no answer for that. You cannot exactly pinpoint where this particular adhyasa has begun, and that's why avidya, ishvara, ishvara-vidya sambandha, kala, etc. have been considered in Advaita as eternal. So here he says bija ankuravat anadihi. So such questions need not be answered. Therefore, the adhyasa is eternal, beginningless, like the seed and the sprout. Avidya adhyasascha ekayeva anadihi. And we find here avidya adhyasascha. That means the projection of avidya is ekayeva anadihi. That is single and it is beginningless. That means actually in this body, when did we appear? Not in this birth, because all of a sudden we don't come into the body from sky. Somewhere in some body we were there, but we don't remember now, because our mind is projected totally, and the very subtle past impressions are deep buried somewhere in the depths of our mind, and they cannot be recollected, and only through deep meditation one can rake up these impressions also and can understand what he was. And thus we find that this particular theory has been attested by the experiences of several sages in India. We find that the sages had gone into deep meditation and they had realized what they were in the previous birth. So this kind of deep impression is called avidya, and that particular impression in the form of world experience is there hidden deep in the mind, and that projects all the way the world around once again, because since the impression is there, it projects the same thing outside, and it is beginningless. Nanu adhyasasya anaditve smrutirupaha paratra purvadruštavabhasaha adhyasaha iti vadata bhashyakarena smrutirupatvena samskarajanyatvam uktvam virudhyeta iti chet na. Now there is an objection. If you say that this avidya is beginningless, then we are afraid there will be contradiction with the statement of Shankara Bhagavad itself, because Adi Shankara has stated in his Bhashya of Brahma Sutra, in the beginning, very beginning itself, while defining the avidya, he said, Smruti Rupaha Paratra Purvadrushta Avabhasaha. He said very clearly that adhyasa is like smruti, like remembrance. Paratra Purvadrushta Avabhasaha. That means it is just projection of some other thing on some other thing. That means something was experienced earlier and that is imposed or projected on some other thing, and it is very close to remembrance. That means when we remember, nothing is before, but still in the mind we remember, like in dreams. So he says Shankara Bhagavad has defined adhyasa in this way. He very lucidly stated that this adhyasa is like smruti, that is remembrance. And remembrance, mind it, remembrance is created by samskara, that is impression. That means we get impression, and from that impression we get remembrance. So this way impression causes remembrance, and if adhyasa is remembrance, then it should be produced from impression. That means you should accept that adhyasa also as something produced. Then how can you say that adhyasa is anadi, beginningless? If it is created, it cannot be beginningless. If it is beginningless, it cannot be created. But Shankara Bhagavad-pada himself has stated that it is like smriti, remembrance. That means it is also produced from some samskara or impression. And of course, even in Vedanta Paribhasha, we find that all Brahma is created by samskara. Now, samskara janyatva muktam viruddhyeta. So thus, there will be a contradiction with the statement of Adi Shankara. So this is the objection. Iti chet, that means if the arguer puts forth this argument, na, this is wrong. We explain, karyadhyasa abhiprayatvat tasya. Now, Madhusudana Saraswati explains that whatever Shankara Bhagavad-pada has explained while defining adhyasa, that relates to karyadhyasa, not to karanadhyasa. We have to understand here these two terms. One is karana adhyasa, one is karyadhyasa. That means where the cause is superimposed and where the effect is superimposed. And in all the instances of the Smriti Rupa Paratra Pura Drushtavabhasa, we understand that it is only the projection of the effect, not the cause. And therefore, and we are talking about the Karana Adhyasa, which is beginningless. That means avidya is beginningless. But whatever is created by that avidya, that is of course produced from some impression. Paratra paravabhasaha iti etavan matrasyaiva ubhayanugatasya lakshanatvat. Of course, if you still feel that a more perfect definition is required of avidya, okay, then you need not bother about smriti rupaha paratra pura drushtavabhasaha. Instead, you can simply satisfy yourself with this definition, paratra paravabhasaha. That's all. That means projection of something on some other thing. So this will naturally suffice, and this will justify both the instances. That means paratra paravabhasaha is the apt definition of adhyasa which can be applied to both the instances. That means karanadhyasa and karyadhyasa. Ubhayanugatasya, that means that which can be applied to both these karanadhyasa, karyadhyasa, that is lakshanatvat. Thus we can accept it as the final definition of adhyasa. Yadva, or we can understand the words of Adi Shankara in this way. Satyanrute midhunikritya iti bhashyavachanat satyamithya sambheda avabhasaha adhyasaha ityeva siddhanta lakshanam. Now Madhusudana Saraswati has understood the logical problems here and the argument also. That's why he says, okay, if you want an appropriate definition of adhyasa which can suit to both the instances, okay, you can take paratra paravabhasaha, or you can say a final definition of adhyasa as satya mithya vastu sambheda avabhasaha. Paratra paravabhasaha or satya mithya vastu sambheda avabhasaha. This is a very fine definition. Of course, you know that in Sanskrit tradition, a lot of importance has been given to the definitions. The more you make your definitions perfect, you rectify them, you add some words and finally make a very clear definition, the more acceptable will be your theory. So that is the thing accepted in our philosophy, and that reached to the height of philosophy, especially in the 12th century. And from 12th century onwards, we find, especially in the Nyaya tradition, then in the Advaita tradition, in Mimamsa and Vyakarana also, that the thinkers then gave lot of importance to their definitions. Because, as Aristotle said, you define your terms and I shall evaluate your theory. That means the depth of our ideology depends on the correctness of our definitions. Therefore, these people have strived very hard to give a perfect definition. And here we find in Chitsukhi, the Advaita Siddhi, and even in the Nyaya texts also, that they have tried to give a very clear, perfect definition. And following that particular tradition, Madhusudana Saraswati gives here the final definition of Adhyasa, saying that Satya Anrute Midhuni Kritya. That's what Bhashya. So this is the sentence taken from the Adhyasa Bhashya of Brahma Sutra, where Adi Shankara has explained the concept Adhyasa as Satyanruti Midhuni Kritya Naisargikoyam Loka Vyavaharaha Aham iti, Aham idam iti, idam mama iti. So this is what he has explained there. That means in his view, Adhyasa is that kind of spiritual blindness which closes our eyes, and that's why we cannot differentiate the real from unreal. Satyanrute mithuni kritya, that's the important word there. Shankaracharya says Satyanrute mithuni kritya, that means conjoining, combining both unreal and real. We experience every moment, this is mine, I am this. So I am this, identifying with the body. This is mine, identifying ourselves with the property or with the external things. That is Yushmad and Asmad, both are combined. And this particular Midhuni Kritya is the base here. Midhuni Kritya means conjoining or combining. And on the basis of this, now Madhusudana Saraswati explains that Satya Mithya Vastu. Satya Vastu, Mithya Vastu. Satya Vastu is real thing, Mithya Vastu is unreal thing. Satya Mithya Vastu Sambheda, that means false identity between the real and the unreal. Tad Avabhasaka, that which projects this kind of identity, is Adhyasa. So this is a very fine definition, and we can understand the heart of Shankaracharya in these words. We understand that this particular Adhyasa within ourselves, that projects some other thing, and that causes the identity between the real and the unreal. And because of that identity only, we are unable to get to ourselves. The moment I open my eyes, I get identified with the other objects. The moment I open my eyes, I have all the things around, and because of that, I am unable to get into my own self. That's what Kathopanishad says in the second Valli. Paran chikhani vyatrunatsvayam bhuhu parang pashyati nantaratman. That means, okay, call it the creator, but he has created the senses extrovert. They function outwardly. That's why parang pashyati, the senses can get the knowledge of all the outer things only. Na antaratman, not the self within. And this understanding of self is possible with the help of meditation. So when we close our eyes and concentrate on our breathing, slowly the pace of breathing gets cool, and we get quiet within, and then we can scan ourselves. All of a sudden we get a thought, where am I in the body? Because we find all the body parts are external, they are visible. All the body parts are visible, but something is there, some feeling, I, that is carrying this as vehicle. So what is that? Who am I? And that we experience, of course. But the moment our eyes are opened, then through the eyes, through the other senses, we become one with the external universe, and we understand that the external universe is real. And here all the problems arise. Advaita says Satya is the consciousness and Mithya is the outer thing, but both sambheda, that means both get identified, both get non-different. And this is the Siddhanta Lakshanam. So Madhusudana Saraswati says that this Satya Mithya Vastu Sambheda Avabhasakaha Adhyasaha be taken as the final definition of Adhyasa. Tena Karanadhyasepi na Lakshana Avyaptihi. So if you accept this definition of Adhyasa, then the defect cited earlier, that this definition suffers from Avyapti, this will not apply to the case of the Karanadhyasa. Now it's clear. If you take this definition of adhyasa, satya mithya vastu sambheda avabhasakaha, then this will be applicable to karanadhyasa also. This will be applicable to karyadhyasa, of course. So thus there will not be the defect of avyapti in this definition. Karyadhyasasya cha pravaha rupena bijankuravat anaditva abhidhanat na kopi doshaha. And what we had stated earlier, that adhyasa is anadi, ekaha anadihi. So you could not understand. You thought that that particular one goes against the statement of Adi Shankara and there will be the defect, logical defect, etc. But we explained that adhyasa is of two types, karyadhyasa and karanadhyasa, and what we have been talking about is karanadhyasa, and beginningless is karanadhyasa, that is the anadi avidya, beginningless avidya. And what Shankaracharya has explained in the beginning of adhyasa can apply to the karyadhyasa. And if you still desire for a perfect definition, then take this satya mithya vastu sambheda avabhasakaha be the final definition which can be applicable to both the cases. Na kopi doshaha. And in this way, by accepting the final definition of adhyasa, there cannot be any defect. Evam adhyase siddhe. So throughout this discussion, Madhusudana Saraswati has strived to prove that there is adhyasa, and he has made it very clear that adhyasa is the pivotal theory of our Advaita philosophy. Adhyase evam siddhe. Adhyasa being established in this way, ekasya atmanaha jiva ishwaradi vyavastha mana meyadi pratikarma vyavastha chaupapadyate. So this is the major problem there. Now the dualists have been arguing that okay, if we accept only one reality, no difference at all in the universe, and all other thing is only mithya, that is illusion, and only Brahman, consciousness is real, there are so many problems. That's what the dualists have argued. And all these discussions have been presented in Advaita Siddhi, to some extent in Chitsukhi also. What is that problem? The dualists argue, if there is one reality, then Jiva Ishvara Abheda. How can you answer the system of Jiva and Ishvara? You say that there is only one consciousness. But answer to this question, what about the system of individual soul and the supreme soul? There are two. One has to accept that, because Jiva, that is the individual soul, is limited, is a soul knowing very little and occupies a very small place. So many things are there. That means Ishvara is supreme consciousness, and that supreme consciousness is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. So how can you say that this Jiva and Ishvara are one? So one has to make room for this particular vyavastha, the system. That is the problem. Another problem, the manameyadi pratikarma vyavastha. That means, how can you justify the mana, that means the pramana, the means of knowledge, meya, something that is the object of knowledge? What happens to all these things? That is a problem there. Manameyadi pratikarma vyavastha. That means there is a very fixed pattern of knowledge, object of knowledge, receiver of knowledge. So all these things are there. So if you say that there are no such things, then that will be against our general experience. So he says two things are to be answered. One, Jiveshwara Vyavastha. Two, Manameyadi Vyavastha. And these, which are matter of regular experience, cannot be justified if we accept identity or only one consciousness. This is the problem. Now, Madhusudana Saraswati explains that throughout this discussion we have understood the concept of adhyasa, and adhyasa being clear, you can answer all the systems. That means Jiva, Ishvara. He says it is because of adhyasa. That means the consciousness is one, but when you attach all conditions to that, it becomes Jiva. And when you remove all the conditions, it becomes Ishvara. So it is after all one consciousness, and just because of our adhyasa, we project several things on the consciousness. This is very particular, that the consciousness flowing through the body is one. But we attribute to that consciousness that it is male, female, it is young or old, it is knowledgeable or fool, everything we attribute to that. And Advaita philosophy makes it very clear to us that you remove all the attachments, remove all the conditions, and what remains there is pure consciousness, and it is called Anupahita Shuddha Chaitanya. And does anyone get the experience of this kind of Shuddha Chaitanya? Yes. We find in deep sleep, we don't have any attachment at all. And everybody will be above from these attachments. Everybody will be free from all these attachments. He will not remember who he is, whether male, female, or rich or poor. All these conditions are removed. Okay, when he comes back, he will be back to his own old life. Even in deep meditation, we experience this, that the pure consciousness throbbing in the body is very pure, like the energy in the electric wire. So it is pure, absolute, and that energy is Chaitanya, and it is the meaning of I. So I am energy, I am the pure consciousness. That's why Adi Shankaracharya very repeatedly says, Shiva Kevala Shivoham, Shiva Kevaloham. So this is the very major theory of Advaita, that basically there is no difference between any two objects. Ultimately all the objects form part of that energy only. That means it is that energy which is trying to manifest itself through various forms, and when these forms, like all conditions, are removed, then pure consciousness remains. So that is the point here. Tathahi. Now, Tathahi, he illustrates that Ajnanopahitaha Atma, Ajnana Tadatmya Apannaha, Swachit Abhasa Vivekat Antaryami Sakshi Jagat Karanam Iticha Kathyate. Buddhi Upahitascha Tat Tadatmyapannaha Swachidabhasa Avivekat Jivaha Karta Bhokta Pramata Iticha Kathyate Iti Vartikakara Padaha. Now we understand Madhusudana Saraswati presents here the view of Vartikakara, Sureshwaracharya. Now what do they say? They say, who is Jiva after all? Jiva is Ajnana Upahita Atma. That means the pure self having a veil or cover called ignorance. So if ignorance veils my vision, I cannot get the vision of the reality, because my vision is blinded. This Atma, the pure consciousness, is like fire beneath the ash. Ajnana is the cover. That's why in Dhumen Avriyate Vannihi Yatha Darsho Malena Cha, Bhagavad Gita also says that it is like Dhumena Avritaha Vannihi, it is like the fire covered by the smoke. So several examples are given there. And this Atma, Ajnana Tadatmya Apannaha, he gets identified with that Ajnana, and because of that he cannot look into himself. He will be projected outside. Swachidabhasa Vivekat, Swachit Abhasa Vivekat. That means just because he has the Viveka, the discrimination of Chidabhasa, the semblance, one portion of consciousness. We understand here that when we look at something, when we know something, what happens there? Two things happen. One, the ignorance of that particular object is removed. Two, that object now shines forth in our knowledge. That means the ignorance of that object being removed and the object being becoming part of our knowledge. So two things are there. Ajnana nashaha, anantara padartha prakashaha. So what does it do? Here we understand that when the chidabhasa, abhasena ghataha spuret, Panchadashi also says that when this particular semblance of consciousness removes the ignorance, then the reality that shines forth itself, so prakasha. So here ajnana swachidabhasa vivekat, because of the semblance of his own consciousness, what happens? The self antaryami sakshi jagat karanam iti cha kathyate. So the same consciousness is called variously as antaryami. That means the energy flowing through within everything, in all the bodies. So that consciousness flowing through all the bodies is antaryami. And not only just flowing like some liquid in a pipe, it is conscious. And this consciousness is alert and it is observing everything, and that is called sakshi. So this consciousness, this energy is flowing through the body and observing that. All the experiences, it is just observer. Advaita doesn't say that it gets the experiences. No. Who gets the experiences? Already we had seen that it is the buddhi, antahkarana, that gets all the experiences. But this consciousness remains back and it will be observing all that. It is the mute spectator. It's just a silent onlooker, and it is sakshi. And not only that, jagat karanam, and at that particular point of time we understand that consciousness as cause of the entire universe. Jagat karanam iti cha kathyate. So that atma consciousness, just because of the semblance of the swachidabhasa, so the same is called atma, this antaryami, sakshi, jagat karanam, etc. Buddhi upahitascha. Now forget about ignorance. Now we come to intellect. Now when the same consciousness is connected to intellect, that means cognitive factor, then tat tadatmya adhyasapannaha, just as the consciousness is connected to the ignorance, here it is connected to the intellect. Now what happens? Swachidabhasa avivekat. Just because the consciousness is connected with the intellect, it forgets about its own real nature. Swachidabhasa, that means it is the semblance of consciousness, it forgets. And because of that aviveka, now it gets various appellations like karta, jivaha, bhokta, pramata. So these are all just because of the attachment of consciousness and the intellect. So these two coming together is one, jivaha, the individual soul, karta, it is the doer, bhokta, enjoyer, pramata, knower. What is this? We find here that according to the Vedanta philosophy, Sukshma Sharira is the conglomeration of 17 things. Saptadasha Avayavatmakam Sukshma Shariram. And there we find all the kosha also. Vijnanamaya kosha, Manomaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha. That means it is nothing but when the buddhi is connected with Panchaprana, it is Pranamaya kosha. When manas is connected with the senses, it is Manomaya kosha. When buddhi is connected with buddhi, manas and jnanendriya, it is Vijnanamaya kosha. And actually in Vedanta philosophy, this particular Vijnanamaya kosha is called jiva. And jivaha samsarati, when it is said that the soul departs this body and takes another body anew, it means that the senses of knowledge together with the intellect and feeling, all these leave the body in a very subtle form and take another body. So this is Advaita understanding. It says that that particular group is called jiva. Vijnanamaya kosha can be safely called as jiva. And here buddhi upahitaha atma, that means when consciousness is combined with that particular intellect because of avidya, then it becomes jiva. And as long as there is this kind of connection between the two, the consciousness and the intellect, that means awareness or cognition, then there is jivatva, That means so long that will be soul, it will be jiva. And because of that particular attachment of this awareness or consciousness, there will be the experience of the world. And because of that, there will be attachment, detachment, and sorrow, happiness. All these feelings arise from this kind of attachment only. And because of this condition, he has to take several births. And all these births will continue so long there will be that particular contact. And once this contact is broken, once they are separated, they are realized in their true sense. That means the unreal is realized as unreal and the real has been realized as real only. That means the consciousness energy is the only reality. If it is experienced, realized, then there will not be any transmigratory life, no samsara, no births further, etc. But the consciousness, if it is connected with the intellect, then there will be several n number of impressions, and those impressions will cause further feelings, and those feelings further cause our births. So this kind of chain, a vicious circle, will be created there. Iti Vartikakara Pada. Thus, Madhusudana Saraswati has given here the view of Vartikakara. Pratideham Buddhinam cha Bhinnatvat. Now, we find here that there are so many cognitions. In each body, the cognition or buddhi, intellect is different. Therefore, tad gata chidabhasa bhedena, naturally the chit abhasa, that means so many intellects in all the crores of bodies, and the semblance of consciousness in all the bodies is different. Therefore, tat aviviktam chaitanyamapi bhinnamiva pratiyate. So though the particular consciousness is avivikta, is not different, separate, but still viviktamiva bhinnamiva pratiyate, but it only appears to be different. That means there is only one sun in the sky, and so many water lakes, ponds, wells, and other, so many gutter, everything is there. And when the same one image of sun gets reflected in all this, there are number of reflections. There will be n number of reflections, but the cause is only one. But still people say that this particular reflection is different from that, and they attribute the purity or impurity of that particular condition to the image. But in fact, nothing will accrue to the image. Everything is within the condition. Similarly, the Ishavasya Upanishad also says in the beginning that saparyagat shukram akayam avranam asnaviragum shuddham apapa viddham. So Ishavasya Upanishad presents it in clear terms that the Atman is shukram, it is pure, shuddham, without any blemishless, apapa viddham, it is sinless, akayam, it has no body, asnaviragum, it has no subtle body also. So everything is denied, all the conditions are denied, and the Upanishad tries to put before us the fact that the Atman is pure, without any difference at all. And when it is realized in that particular state, then there will not be any difference at all. Ajnanasya tu sarvatra abhinnatvat. And this ignorance is also one everywhere. Tadgata chidabhasa bheda bhavat. And that particular consciousness connected to the ignorance is also one everywhere. Tat avivikta sakshi chaitanyasya na kadachidapi bheda bhanam. So that's why in our bodies, when this consciousness is connected with the intellect, the semblance of consciousness inside, which is observing everything as the onlooker, as mute spectator, so that particular one cannot be different from any other thing. That's what Advaita says. That means in all the bodies there is intellect, there is that particular energy called consciousness, and Advaita tries to elucidate the theory that the intellects may be different, but the consciousness is the same. It is just like the vessels may be so many, but the water poured into the vessel is the same. The same water taken from the bucket can be poured into different vessels. The electricity, that power, will be flowing through several electric wires, but that energy cannot be stated as different from another type of energy. So energy is one. Similarly, this consciousness, the Atma, is one. That's what our Advaita tries to tell us. Asmischa pakshe tattvamadi pade jahallakshana eva. And here, now, if we understand this particular concept, that the Atma and behind the Sakshi, there are no separate things. It is only one consciousness, and the same consciousness is present in all the bodies. Okay, this we have understood. Asmischa pakshe, that means in the view of this Vartikara, Tattvamadi pade, that means in the Mahavakya, Tat Tvam Asi, we find Tat, that, Tvam, you, Asi, are. That art thou, thou art that. So this kind of Mahavakya is there in the Chandogya Upanishad. Now, Tattvamadi pade. Now, how to understand the two words there? Because Tat means that. Naturally, the word refers to something which is far, which is beyond reach. Several things are there. And Tvam means that which is before, that which is a matter of experience. So, one is Tat, that is Paroksha, that means not direct, indirect. Tvam is direct. So, two things are different. But Advaita says that both are one. How? Tat Tvam Asi. That means when Upanishad says that there is complete identity between Tat and Tvam, how to understand that identity? There should be some logic behind. Or we perhaps do not have that kind of eligibility or spiritual qualification to understand that particular reality. So in that circumstances, we cannot say that the Upanishadic statement is wrong. We have to justify that. We have to understand, going beyond the words. Now Advaita comes for our rescue, and it says that Tat Tvam. Of course, if you take the direct meaning of these two words, there will be absolute contradiction. That Tat means that, Tvam means the something before. But Tat means the same energy, Tvam means the same energy, but Tat is that kind of energy with different conditions. Tvam is a kind of energy with different conditions. If you remove the conditions, there will remain only one consciousness, one energy, and that is the Advaita. That means where there not be any kind of Nama, Rupa, all conditions. So the conditionless reality is Advaita. And this particular ideology tries to enable us get the realization that the energy is one, and the energy is throbbing throughout the universe, in my body also, and that energy is the lone reality. So it tries to say that that is real, that is Brahman, and everything else is only an appearance, a projection. And that's why we have to understand the projection as projection only. Sitting in the cinema hall also, when we watch a movie, then something is projected on the screen, and many of us get identified with the things projected on the screen, and we weep sometimes, laugh sometimes, something, everything is our reaction. But sometimes we realize that it is only something projected. The world experience is also like that in Advaita philosophy. That means it is only a projection of mind, and once this projection stops, then the energy or consciousness remains as pure energy only. Sabhasasya upadhehe vachyarthasya hanat. Another point is there, that how to understand the meaning of Tattvamasi in the Advaita point of view. Simple, he says Jahal Lakshana. That means according to Vartikakara, if you want to understand Tattvamasi, then you will have to apply the Jahal Lakshana. Lakshana means the secondary word power. that we had seen earlier in the beginning of the text itself, that Lakshana means secondary word power. Primary word power is Abhidha. That means the word potency, because of which we get the direct meaning, is called Abhidha. And when the direct meaning is not possible, when some problem comes there in some syntactic problem, then we take recourse to the secondary word power, and it is called Lakshana. Thus two things are very important here, one Abhidha and another Lakshana. And in Lakshana also, we observe that sometimes we do not give up the direct meaning, the first meaning totally. We take something of that. It is Jahat Ajahat. That means the unnecessary part we give up, and the necessary part we take, accept. So this is called Jahat Ajahat. And there is of course another one where we completely get rid of the direct meaning. We give up, and it is called Jahal Lakshana. Jahal Lakshana, Ajahal Lakshana. That means sometimes we have to give up the direct meaning, the first meaning. Sometimes we have to totally accept the direct meaning. But the third case is also there, where the direct meaning is not totally denied or totally accepted, it is partially accepted. And that particular partial acceptance of the direct meaning is applicable in Tat Tvam Asi also. That means, Tat means that energy which is understood as omniscient, omnipotent, etc., etc. Tvam is that consciousness which is understood as Alpajna, occupying less place and very limited, etc. If you remove the conditions, removing the conditions means giving up the direct meaning partially, but accepting that direct meaning is also there. What is that? Consciousness. So if you take the part of consciousness only and remove all the other attachments, then you will understand that the energy expressed by the word Tat and the energy expressed in the form of Tvam is one. There is no difference at all. Thus, we have to accept Jahat Ajahal Lakshana. But Jahat Ajahal Lakshana is partial acceptance of this. Now, can we take partial acceptance Jahat Ajahal Lakshana, which is Bhaga Lakshana, or Jahal Lakshana is there? That means complete denial of the direct meaning. Jahal Lakshana. That means the first meaning is completely given up and second meaning is taken completely. Now, Madhusudana Saraswati explains that Jahat Ajahal Lakshana is accepted. Of course, in Vedanta Sara, Vedanta Paribhasha and another Advaita texts, we find that Jahat Ajahal Lakshana is accepted. Though Dharmaraj Advarindra does not accept Lakshana in Tat Tvam Asi, he says in Tat Tvam Asi there is only Abhidha. That means the identity is the direct meaning of Tat Tvam Asi, he says. Of course, after explaining Lakshana only, he says that in Tat Tvam Asi we need not go for Lakshana, it is the direct meaning itself. But in Vedanta Sara, of course, we find that Tat Tvam Asi, in the case of Tat Tvam Asi, Bhaga Lakshana or Jahad Ajahal Lakshana should be accepted. And here, Vartikakara holds his own view. He says, in Tat Tvam Asi, it is only Jahal Lakshana. That means you give up the conditions. You need not go for the direct meaning at all and directly go for the indirect meaning or the secondary meaning. How? Take for example, when somebody says the Simha Manavakaha, that means Manavaka, that means a small boy, young boy, he is Simha, he is lion. What do we understand? We have to give up the direct meaning. He is not lion, he is not an animal. That direct meaning is absolutely given up. And then we go for the indirect meaning. What is that? The implied meaning is that boy is like lion. That means he has the virtues of a lion. He has the bravery of a lion. He is very dynamic, daring, etc. So here in this particular example, we have given up the direct meaning totally, but have taken the secondary meaning. But in few examples, we have to take the direct meaning and indirect meaning also. How? When somebody says, Chatrino Gachanti. So we understand there, Chatrinaha means persons holding umbrellas. When they are going, somebody who is going there without an umbrella is also included. And actually, the Chatra includes all these things. Or you can take the example of Manchaha Kroshanti. There also you say, when that particular cot is making sound, it's actually, cot does not make a sound. The sound is produced. So here also, that producing sound is identified with the cot. So in all this we find another example given in the Kavya Prakash also, that when we say Ayur Ghrutam, there is identity. That means Ghee means longevity. Ghee means life. And another sentence is there, Ayureva Ghrutam. That means ghee is definitely life. Ayureva idam, Ayurvai Ghrutam. So these are all the sentences. We find small difference there. When we say Ayur Ghrutam, there is identity. Ayureva idam, there is identity, but difference is also there, because idam we have used. So Ayurvai Ghrutam, Ayureva idam. So in all these sentences we find that in some we have to give up the direct meaning, take the secondary meaning. At some places we have to take both. At some places we have to totally give up the direct meaning. So these are the various theories mentioned about the word potency. It is Lakshana, Shadvidha, Lakshana, etc. accepted in the Sahitya Shastra also. Finally, what comes out from this discussion is, according to Sureshwaracharya Vartikara, in Tat Tvam Asi, there is only Jahal Lakshana. That means you give up the direct meaning and get on to the secondary meaning, and there you get Chaitanyam as the Lakshartha. That is the implied meaning there. And now, Abhasasyapi Jada Jada Vilakshanattvena Anirvachaniyatvat. Okay, earlier also he explained to us this Jaga, that means the world, is Anirvachaniya, inexplicable. Avidya is inexplicable. Now what about this projection, Abhasa? That means the semblance. Now he says that also is inexplicable. That means you cannot say whether it is real or unreal. Now when I see something on some other thing, like I see snake, actually that is a rope, but I see only snake. There several Anirvachani are there. The ignorance because of which the snake is projected there, it is inexplicable, and that particular cognition of snake is also inexplicable. So thus the Abhasa too, the Abhasa means here appearance of snake, that too is Anirvachaniya. Taduktam Sankshepa Sharirake. And now he quotes from Sankshepa Shariraka. What does he say? Sabhasa Ajnana Vachi Yadi Bhavati Punar Brahma Shabdaha Tada Aham Shabdaha Ahankara Vachi Bhavati Tu Jahati Lakshana Tatra Pakshe. Now he explains that this Sabhasa Ajnana Vachi Yadi Bhavati Punaha Brahma Shabdaha. That means if you take the word Brahman in the sense of Sabhasa Ajnana, that means Ajnana Upahita Chaitanya, Sa Abhasa, Abhasa Yukta Ajnana Vachi. Then what happens? That means that word Brahma, if it taken in the sense of Abhasa Ajnana, that means both semblance of Chaitanya and here this ignorance, that is the combination of both. If you take in that sense, then the meaning of I will be what? Aham Shabdaha Ahankara Vachi Bhavati. Then there will be attachment of Ahankara. That means pure Aham will be attached with Kartrutva also, Ahankara Vachi. Tu Jahati Lakshana Tatra Pakshe. Tatra pakshe tu jahad lakshana. That means in this particular view, the type of lakshana to be accepted is only jahal lakshana. And asmin pakshe, now Madhusudana Saraswati says that this paksha is of vartikakara. That is Sureshwaracharya's view, that Brahma means sabhasa ajnana, aham means ahankara, and therefore the type of word potency accepted there is jahal lakshana. So this way he has explained here the view of vartikakara, and further he will be explaining to us this Sureshwaracharya's view that it is only abhasa. Abhasa means only a semblance or projection. So this will be continued in the coming pages also, and we will see in our next class the discussion related to the Abhasavada of Advaita. We know that Abhasavada, Pratibimbavada, Avachedavada, these are all various theories about the nature of soul, nature of Brahman, everything. So here we are now understanding the Abhasavada, and here we stop. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.